Hey everybody, what's going on? Hellmite here, bringing you another video from Grab the Lantern today. Today I wanted to talk a little bit about scaling champions and playing for late game, and basically giving you guys tips and advice on how to get these very squishy, very difficult to play champions on occasion, all the way to the late game hours where they're actually able to shine. Now, it's a lot easier playing a lane bully where essentially your strategy is win early, right? Win lane, win game, and just be able to pressure your absolute brutal force in order to win the game off of how good you are in lane. But those champions do have the downside of not scaling quite as well and being relevant on winning lane or on winning in the first 20 minutes of the game in order to actually get the victory. A lot of champions like Renekton, while they can be very oppressive in lane, will fall off quite hard once laning phase ends, and they need to do their utmost to either snowball the game to a victory before that happens, or in order to win the game by 20 minutes so that way they don't fall off. Unlike those champions, late game scaling champions are kind of okay with even losing lane or going even. They don't really care so much because as long as the game is still going on, they are still scaling, they still have a chance to win that game off the back of how strong they will be. Obviously, this isn't relevant if the game is ending super fast and you're getting completely snowballed on, but generally speaking, that's what they can kind of look to do. So there is sort of a comfort in playing a champion where you know inevitability is on your side and you don't have to worry quite as much about trying to smash the laning phase when you know that all you really have to do at the end of the day is just kind of scale it out and wait for it. So today's video, we're going to break down a couple of tips on how to get these champions to late game. Now, just a quick sort of caveat here. This is not necessarily just applying to infinite scaling champions like Nasus or Veigar. These champions literally permanently get stats as long as the game is going on. It doesn't even have to apply to them. Champions like Kayle or Kog'Maw or Karthus, as even though they won't get permanently stronger, they can easily carry games by virtue of how much damage they can deal with items and levels. Just by their scalings are great, or they have certain effects, especially mixed damage, that makes them very difficult to itemize against, and so they can kind of just do true damage to enemy champions and blow them away. So either way, these tips are designed to help you guys with when you do choose to play these champions. First, and the biggest tip here is you have to survive. These champions are super weak early. Kayle is sort of an extreme example here, but Pre-6 Kayle is the worst single champion in the game, in my opinion, besides maybe Yuumi. Kayle will not do anything. She's actually worth less than a caster minion, I would say, at level 1. Like, just straight up, she will lose a 1v1 to any champion in the game pre-level 6. And even after level 6, she will still lose most matchups in the game. So you have to try and just get yourself to the late stages of the game in order to even have a chance on these champions. You are not going to win laning phase, which is the most important thing to keep in mind. Oftentimes, the sort of thought process is, well, the enemy champion is low, or, well, I can maybe try to poke them out, or I can play a little aggressively, but a lot of times, especially if you're playing up against a lane bully, you will never win those matchups unless they're just playing completely greedy and sticking around at 100 health, and all you have to do is walk up and auto-attack them once more time to kill them, right? Like, in most situations, trying to force a 1v1 on a late game scaling champion is never going to work out for the late game scaling champion unless your opponent is also a scaling champion, and then maybe there's some room for play there. But generally speaking, you have to play every game as if you are playing up against a lane bully. So that means giving them space, respecting them if they want to step up, and just generally trying to keep yourself in range at least to get XP and last hit. Obviously, you're not going to be of much use at all if you're not getting your items. A level 16 Kayle with no items is just as worthless as a level 1 Kayle with no items, in my opinion. She's just not going to do enough. Obviously, that's a bit of a hyperbole there, but she's not going to do nearly as much as you would expect other champions to do, right? She has to have her items. So it's not enough to just survive and get XP. You do need to be last hitting as well, and that means using your abilities whenever possible to make sure you get whatever CS you can, and more importantly, to let you CS safely. Even if Kog'Maw has to be spamming his Q off cooldown or his E off cooldown just to hit CS that's out of his auto attack range, like, that's fine, just as long as he's getting that CS and he's able to sort of at least somewhat stick in with his enemy laner, right? The best situation, obviously, is if the opposing laner is able to push in on you, because even though, yeah, you have to last hit under tower, you do at least have the advantage of being able to pick up CS relatively safely and not having to worry about the enemy champion being able to sort of get on top of you and basically beat you up while you're trying to last it. Usually you're safe under tower, and in the early stages of the game, most champions can't take more than 1 or 2 tower shots, so you're fairly safe as long as you're able to sit underneath there. So someone pushing you in is totally fine. You don't need to worry about that at all. Generally, like I said, you just want to be trying to avoid fights and try not to shove at all if you can, because you want to be keeping that wave on your side of the way of the lane. Obviously, there's a little bit of wave management that comes into here. If it starts pushing back towards them, you want to make sure it hits the tower so you can crash it and then get it to reset back to the middle of the wave. This is all sort of basic wave management stuff, but generally speaking, you will want to pay attention to that, because if the enemy freezes on their side of the lane and you're scaling champion that has to push up, you're going to have a bad time. Second, you do want to be considering your runes and item setups here. It's not enough to just kind of say, yeah, I can just build the same things every game, or even to take, you know, super aggressive runes. It's super tempting to optimize into greedy runes to really make your late game strong, but it might be better to take a more defensive setup to help you survive. A good example is what I normally do with Kale, which is taking Fleet Footwork versus something like Press the Attack or Lethal Tempo. Obviously, I'm not going to have nearly as much damage in the later stages of the game, but I will have significantly more survivability in the early game when it matters, thanks to the sustain and movement speed that that rune gives more or less for free every couple of seconds. So you do want to kind of consider that, where, yeah, the extra damage you're going to have is late, but that's more of a win more thing, right? You've already made it to late game. You've already got your items. Yeah, Lethal Tempo is going to help you win harder, but just making it to late game, even with a suboptimal rune, is going to be better for you in the long run. It's the same reason why you see champions like Kassadin take Fleet Footwork as well. Even though he could opt into something like Dark Harvest or Electrocute to really make his assassination attempt strong, he has to survive to get to the point where he can assassinate somebody. And this goes for not even just keystones as well. Your secondaries are very important. If you're really concerned about survival, taking a secondary into Resolve for things like Bone Plating, Second Wind, or even Overgrowth is a really good idea, as it does give you that slight edge when enemy champions are trying to all-in you. I know if I'm up against someone like a Renekton or a lane bully like Zed, I'm going to be taking defensive runes because I really want to make sure I don't die, and Resolve is one of the best in business at helping to keep you alive. And if you have mana as a problem, dipping into Sorcery for Mana Flow Band can be a good idea, even if you're not like going to be itemizing mana. At the very least, it can help you keep topped up and allow you to continue to last hit at range with your abilities. Also, taking double resist is not a bad idea if you are going to be scaling for late game. You're already going to have plenty of damage on these sort of late game scaling champions. Like, that's not the problem that your champion has, it's survival. So taking double resist will give you the edge in the sort of early game to help you survive against the opponent who likely will be trying to shove you in and make you have a bad time. Builds as well is important to consider. Obviously, the new item system punishes you for splashing item components a lot more than the old system does, since legendaries are worth significantly more. But if necessary, buying a Seeker's Arm Guard or Verdant Barrier or Hex Drinker can help you stay in the game for a lot longer in order to actually get CS. If you're able to take less damage from Zed because of the bonus armor you have on the Seeker's Arm Guard, then you're able to stay in lane for longer, you're able to get more CS, get more XP, and not lose the lane in that regard. If you're forced to back every 30 seconds because the enemy laner has poked you out or traded you out, you're still not going to be able to scale because you won't have XP, you won't have gold. Yeah, you didn't die, but you're still going to lose the lane off of just being starved out. Being forced out of lane is at sometimes just as bad as dying, because even though you didn't give over gold, you still may be missing huge waves, you still may be missing CS. Generally speaking, is just not a good thing. So being able to sort of flex up your build, even if you're just splashing an item and you don't actually intend to build it into something completed, it can be a huge deal to just keep you in that game and in the lane at least a little bit longer. If you're really getting brutalized, you can think about changing your mythic for a more defensive option. For example, building Shield Bow instead of Kraken Slayer. Even though, yeah, you're not going to have the insane amount of damage you're used to, Shield Bow will let you actually survive long enough to use that insane amount of damage that you will still have. And finishing one legendary before Mythic isn't a suboptimal purchase, because your Mythic doesn't give you benefits if you have no other legendaries for it to benefit. So you can always go a Zhonya's Hourglass or Banshee's Veil into your Mythic item, maybe splashing like the Lost Chapter for mana, regen, in order to sort of compensate for aggressive laners who are trying to kill you. You can at least build your full legendary item, giving you some benefits, and then go into your Mythic from there. Absolutely don't consider a gluey build as your be-all end-all. You have to hit the late game, and you won't if you keep dying, so it's much better for you to try and find a way to stick around as long as possible and flex that build up, rather than saying, I have to build a Kraken Slayer or I'm irrelevant. No, you're not. You're Kog'Maw. You still do a ton of damage, trust me, but you need to survive to use it. Finally, you finally hit late game. Now what? This late game is a very risky part of the game because of how punishing the respawn timers are. Dying at 40 minutes into the game may mean the enemy team is a 4v5 for up to a full minute, with which they can push, they can secure late game objectives, and they can really punish your team at a man disadvantage. So you do have to be careful, and no champ is ever invincible, or at least not for longer than 5 seconds if your name is Tryndamere. You can always die even if you're a late game hyperscaling champion that has their items and has their levels. So once you've made it to late game, you need to be making sure to coordinate with your team in order to make the most out of your damage output. A lot of these hyperscaling champions are champions that are damage dealers. They do need a front line to operate behind, and so generally speaking, if you plan on playing them, you need to make sure your team has enough options to enable you in order to actually let your damage mean something. If you're never able to step up in DPS, it doesn't matter that you have enough damage to kill Baron solo. You're not actually going to be able to ever use it, unfortunately. So it is something to consider, that you need to be still playing with your team. Obviously, yes, you have the high damage, and when you see your moment, you can commit to it very hard now that you have your items and have your levels, but you need to be trying to play with your team, and you need to be trying to think smart about when and where you do take your engagements. A lot of the skills that apply to playing AD carries do apply to these kinds of playstyles, so if you play a lot of AD, you probably already know a lot of these things in how to step up, how to play behind the front line, and how to make the most out of your absurd damage. And that's going to be it for me today, guys. Thank you all so very much for watching. I hope you learned a little bit about how to play scaling champions. And let me know if you guys have any other comments about what you do in order to get your favorite late game champion to late game. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say down in the comments section below. If you enjoyed today's video, go ahead and leave a like. And if you really enjoyed today's video, consider subscribing. I upload a video every Monday, Friday, and on patch days as well. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it. And I'll talk to you all later.